Okay, so now let's go in and let's make sure the entire frame is welded correctly. So we want to go to right click vertex, select all the vertices, and shift right click, merge vertices, and then let's go to merge vertices options. And threshold, let's change that to 0.01 and always merge for two vertices. And I click merge. So press Q to quit, and in object mode, let's press 3 and check it out. So this looks like it needs a couple edge loops at all the intersections to get these corners a lot tighter. So let's go ahead and do that. So back on 1, let's go into edge mode and insert edge loop tool options, and let's do relative distance from edge and click and drag to add that edge loop. So for those of you that are following along with this, if your edge loop didn't actually go all the way around, like it only did half of the bike, then that means your object wasn't welded together. So you can try to merge vertices again, or go around all the way like this and go to and select each pair at a time. I know it's a little tedious, but sometimes selecting all of them and merging vertices doesn't always work. So you do sometimes have to go in and shift right click and merge vertices to center, and go around and do that for each individual pair. So you can tell if you need to do that if your edge loops don't go all the way around and they only do half the model. So I'm going to press 3, and you can already see that that corner is becoming a little tighter, but I want to go around on every corner and add an edge loop kind of close to the existing edge. So insert edge loop like this. Let's just drag that there, and drag that there. So you can see it's going all the way around. And let's go and do that at all the intersections. Here, and here, and here, and here. Now, some of you may notice that this isn't exactly symmetrical anymore. For those really nitpicky perfectionists out there, we can go back later and delete half the model and mirror it again to make sure these are exactly symmetrical. But for now, let's continue like this. So what I'm saying is, when you do this side and this side, it's not going to be perfectly symmetrical because you have no way of precisely adding this edge loop in the same spot. But that's okay. I'm going to go around and do that. In a way, it's like we're adding weld marks to the frame. By adding just a little more edge detail, it gives the smoothness when you press 3 a lot more tightness, if you will. So let's continue going around everywhere where a member meets another member. I'm going to Control Z that, press G to try it again. So right there, and right there, and also right here, and right here. So here, and also, well, no, let's not do that yet. Let's press 3, Q to quit, and just look at it. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So we're still going to continue to work on one mode, but the more edges we add to it, eventually there'll be very little difference between 1 and 3. But for now, let's leave it on 1, and go from here. So let's go into our layers and turn on the image plane again. Press 3, look at it like this. So let's go around and tighten up a few more things. I can see that this is kind of messed up right now. It should look like this one. So that must mean that it's missing an edge loop here. So I'm going to go to Edge, Insert Edge Loop. Like that. Look at M3 again. Okay, that's looking a little better. And one of the other things I want to do is tighten up this so it's a bit more abrupt. So let's go into face mode and select all these faces here. And let's both scale it down in this direction and move it down vertically like this. And let's add another edge loop around here, and maybe another one here. Q to quit. Okay, so that's a little better. It's looking a little too oval. This tube might be a little rounder than this, but we'll fix that later. So let's go over here and do the same thing. We'll go over to the seat tube here and do something similar. Edge, shift right click, insert edge loop tool. Let's add one there. Let's add one here. Maybe one here. Oh, you know, actually before we do that, let's Control Z out of this. And let's do the same thing that we did with the seat post, where we'll scale it down in this direction a little bit. Let's scale it down also in this direction. And then move it over and down a little bit. So now let's go in and do that again. Let's insert our edge loop here, here, and maybe one in the middle. Okay, pretty good. And let's add another edge loop to this seat post. Right here. Okay, so that looks good. So I'm constantly spinning the model around and trying to evaluate how the overall shape is looking. Okay, I think I've spotted the next thing we should do is this. Let's add some edge loops to this stem here that holds the handlebars. So again, we'll go into edge mode, insert edge loop tool, click this, and then click this edge. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And let's add one maybe here towards the end. And why don't we add one more by pressing G here. And we can also select all these here, and looking back at our reference photos, I know that this stem gets a little bit larger to accommodate the handlebars. So let's shift right click and extrude the faces. And we'll drag out so it does that a little bit so you can see what it's doing there. I'm gonna drag it out more than I should just to show you. I think maybe that's kind of good. Okay, press Q to quit, let's go ahead and try to make this a little rounder. No, that's not so good. Maybe it's these faces. Let's pull it by face. Let's select this face and this face, and let's just move them out a little bit and scale them down so that when you smooth it, it looks a little more spherical. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's pull up our reference photo real quick and zoom in on the handlebars a bit. So you can see that this comes around and the handlebar is sort of clamped through the hole here. So let's get ready to make this handlebar. Switching back to side view by pressing spacebar and spacebar again in side view. Let's go to create polygon primitives. Let's make another plane, and it's going to put it over here, and we're going to take this plane and drag it to where the handlebars start. And let's scale it down by pressing R. Going something like that, or like that. Let's right click on the object, go into edge mode. So this happens once in a while where I actually wanted to go into edge mode on the plane, but it selected the object. So what we can do is right click, go back to object mode, click this and Control H to hide it. Now we have this, and I can go to edge mode, click the edge I want, and let's start extruding it out a bit. That. Then I'm going to rotate it this way. Press G to extrude again. And then I'll rotate again. G to extrude again. Rotate. This time followed by a move. G to extrude again. Let's rotate it. And so to rotate, I'm clicking this outer circle here. So let's rotate it again, and G to extrude. As long as you don't make another command, you can keep pressing G to extrude. G. Then G again. Press Q to quit the command, and let's press spacebar to get out of here and take a look at what the object is looking like in 3D. Let's press Control Shift H to re-show the bike, and let's move with this selected. Let's move it out to this side, maybe about here. We'll reference this later with the front photo, but something around here looks pretty good. Pressing 3, we can look at what it's like when it's smoothed. And let's go ahead and select the frame, and let's put it on a new layer. Let me turn it on and off, and let's double click the layer name and call it frame. And let's click this, the handlebar, and make a new layer for that. Double click the name and type handlebars. And let's double click the original background layer. I forgot to rename that, so let's just call that image plane. So now we have 3 layers, one for each object. We're getting ready to thicken the handlebars, but before we do that, let's move back into side view and let's evaluate how this is being shaped in smooth if we're looking at it on 3. So I actually want to move some vertexes around just to get this shape a little closer. So this object is being smoothed right now. If you look at 1, it's still like that. And then on 3, it's a bit like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to press spacebar now to move back into perspective view, and what we're going to do is we're going to extrude the handlebars inwards. Or how about out? Let's go this way a little bit. And let's turn it back to 1 while we're doing this. Press 3. Okay. So Q to quit. And let's select the frame and press 1. And we're going to extrude the handlebars to the middle of the frame, and then we're going to mirror the handlebar across that axis. So let's extrude face and turn on snap to points. And this time let's drag the blue arrow and go around here. So it'll snap to the middle of that seam line. So if you look at 4, it snapped exactly there. Let's turn snap off and press Q to quit, and press 5 to move back into shaded mode. So looking at the handlebar smoothed and this frame smoothed, I don't think the handlebar is hitting where it should. It should be a little more down, so let's select all these top vertices on the handlebar, and you can see that if I press 4, I've only got the handlebar vertices selected. And let's press W and move it forward, and let's also scale it down slightly so it fits into it. Once we press 3, okay, that looks like it's hitting correctly. Okay, that looks good. Let's also go in and add a vertex, add an edge loop. Let's add edge loop here and here to tighten up that corner a bit. Okay, and press Q to quit, and in vertex mode, let's round this corner by moving it. So I just selected these 2 corner ones. So let's move it up and in a little bit to give it a better curve. And looking at this on 1, I'm going to press Alt H to hide. Excuse me. I have to select the object, press Alt H to isolate it, and then I'm going to add another edge loop towards this end of the bar, just so that the bar doesn't taper as much. Okay, that looks good. And then Control Shift H to reveal all. Whoops, I accidentally added another edge loop, so I'm going to Control Z to get out of that, and Q to quit. And let's go select the frame and turn that to 3 as well. Let's go down here towards the bottom of the bar and insert another edge loop towards the end. When we do this on smooth mode, it automatically overlays the box version too. And so you should be really staring at where you're inserting the edge loop on the box model and not the smooth. Okay, great. Q to quit. And I'm going to save the model. Let's go in and look at our reference image, the front image, and you can see that the handlebar actually curves slightly more, and it's a bit wider than what I have. so you can see the difference. So let's select all these vertices on this side, press W, and we'll move them out. And then at the same time, let's select this corner segment, the cross window, and then move that back in a little. That. And maybe even, let's select all of these on the left, and let's move the whole thing down a little bit. And go back and move these a bit more up. So we can look at the front view of the bike. Spacebar. And so the front is actually the back view. So let's go to Panels, Orthographic, New, Back. And so now we're looking at the back, which is actually the front. So if we look at that and bring in, why don't we bring in the actual front view image plane and see how it's lining up. Let's go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and let's browse to the bike and find the front shot, which is there. And so I can tell that since it's blocking the model, it's actually in front of the model, so I'm going to press spacebar to move out into perspective view so I can see. Oh, it's actually, I have to select it here and go to Attribute Editor. And let's, under Image Plane Attributes, let's have it in all views. Let's make sure it's on in all views, which it is, which now means it's actually way out in front, like this. So let's select it in this view and move it behind the bike. So you can see in this view, as I'm sliding it back, you can see that the bike comes to the forefront, like that. So let's go back to our front view and scale up the photo to match the bike. And I'm really just looking at the top of the frame here. And the bottom of the forks. So let's go into Shade X-ray so we can look through the model, and also turn on the edges so we can see this model a little better. So, I mean, granted there is, let's say, some camera distortion. So now I'm looking at the top of the fork versus that, and let's keep scaling it up. Okay, that's looking pretty close, I think. Okay, so we have a lot more to extrude out on the handlebars. So let's make some adjustments to match this photo. I'm going to select the handlebars and go into vertex mode. Take these and let's drag them out this far. And maybe down a little bit like that. I'm going to go to shading and turn off X-ray real quick so I can see what the bike is doing. And so these handlebars have grip tape on them, so we're going to go in and thicken up the handlebars to make it look like they have tape. Let's actually take this photo and move it up a little bit. Okay. And let's curve these bars, selecting this, and let's use our soft select actually and press B and drag until you see the circle appear like this, and we'll keep dragging down so that it's more of a localized effect like this, and then we'll drag to the left. Okay, that's not enough, so let's widen the thing a little bit. Okay. Alright, something like that. And let's move this back up. I actually think we need to add another edge loop here to curve it up slightly. Let's press Q to quit and B to turn off the soft select, and select these middle vertices and move them up slightly to curve the handlebars a little, and move this set of vertices to curve the handlebars a little. And then let's move all of them down a little bit. Okay, so that's much closer. Let's take a look what it's looking like in perspective view. Something about this doesn't quite feel right. The handlebars seem kind of odd. So again, there must be something going on with, let's say, the perspective of the photograph. And I feel like despite what the photograph is doing, I want to narrow these handlebars a little bit more. Just because I know from experience that the handlebars aren't really ever that wide. So I'm just dragging them in. I'm going to move these up a little bit because as I dragged it in, the angle became a little too severe. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's select this other image plane, go into the channel box. Let's make a new layer and call it front image plane. Save it, and let's turn off that one. And let's rotate it around a little. This corner is looking a bit odd, so let's go in and I'm going to show you. Let's delete this edge loop. So we double click to select the whole thing, and then shift right click, delete edge. And let's do the same thing here. Double click, shift right click, delete edge. Let's go into vertex mode and move this edge up a little while we're on 3. Okay, so now let's go back in and then add the edge back in. Insert edge loop. Let's go back like that and add one closer to this. Okay, great. So, you know what? I still don't like the way that this is looking like an elbow, and I think it should be much smoother. So let's go back and remove some of these faces. In one mode, I'm going to double click this one, and we're going to delete edge and remove that edge. And let's also go and remove this whole corner. So I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, and press delete on my keyboard. And now I'm going to select vertex, these two vertices, and shift right click, merge vertices to center. And select the bottom two, and I can just press G to do the same thing. And I'm going to go into edge mode, select this edge, and move it out slightly like this, and press 3. So that's looking way better. It's maybe a little narrow here. So I'm going to take this edge and slide it out this way. Okay, way better. There's more than one way to do things in Maya, so I highly encourage you to constantly be evaluating your work versus the photo or the object that you're looking at. In this case, I showed you how to do it one way, but I went back and realized that having too many edges made the model a little too lumpy in that case. So by eliminating some edges and combining some faces, I have a much smoother result. So now let's go ahead and extrude the handlebars a little bit to make it look like there's bar tape wrapped around the bar. So what we're going to do is, let's Alt H. Well, actually, no, let's leave it on. Let's Control H the frame so we can just see the photo and the tape. And you know what? So let's select all of the handlebar by going into face mode and cross window dragging, and let's shift cross window drag from right to left to unselect these faces there. And I'm gonna actually, we should insert a line here somewhere here. Let's add another edge, and this edge is going to be where the tape starts, because I want a little bit of an elevation change between the thickness of the metal and the thickness of the tape that's wrapped around the bar. So that's what that edge is. Okay, so then from here I'm going to cross window drag across all these like that. Make sure you don't get this portion. But it looks like, oh, see, I missed one, so shift right click to select the missing face. And now I'm going to do something that I haven't done before with the extrude command. I'm going to shift right click, go into extrude face, and I'm going to turn my divisions from 1 to 2. So make sure it's on 2 before you do this. So now I'm going to press extrude, and I'm going to drag out a little with the blue arrow. So that happened. That's not correct. So I'm going to Control Z that, and then unclick my my snap, which was the problem. So once that's unclicked, then I can drag smoothly again by clicking on this arrow. And so you can see in one, when I do that, when I'm dragging out on this arrow, let me do that a little more, you can see the two divisions, which was 1 and 2. So if I switch this back to 1, you can see that there's no line, or if I switch back to 3, it'll add 3 lines. So what the 2 or the 3 or the 4 or the 5 does is actually it makes that, here I'm going to press Q to quit, it makes the extrusion, it gives it a little more, it gives it this edge. Otherwise it would be more of a straight curve. So this still isn't as abrupt as I'd like it, so looking back at 1, I'm going to add another edge loop right here. So I'm going to undo that, and so I'll show you in smooth mode what adding that edge loop over here does. So that just makes the change to the tape a little more abrupt. So, and then I can go back in in my history, in my channel box layer, I can go to extrude and still adjust the thickness of the tape. So right now it's 0.02. So let's bump it up a little and go to 0.03. About 0.05. Okay. So that looks okay. So now I'm going to go and extrude some of the ridges on the bar tape. So you might take this opportunity to save the file and then save it as a new file. because I'm about to add some more faces to this handlebar to get some of the tape detail. So let's go to Modify, Convert, Smooth Mesh Preview to Polygons. Press Q to quit, and I'm going to go into this. I'm going to double click this, double click these two rows. Actually, I'll start back here. Double click this one, click, and then double click the next one. And let's go Shift Extrude Face. Let's go to the options here. Make sure divisions are at 1, 30 for smoothing angle, offset 0, thickness 0, and extrude. And so now I'm going to, in offset, I'm going to type in 0.02. Oh, actually, that's not what I mean. I'm going to drag this up. 0.02. Sorry, local translate should be 0.02. And then I'll press 3 to view what it looks like. And let's do the next 2 rows. So Shift Extrude, local translate 0.02. And let's press 3 to take a look at what this looks like. So I'm going to keep doing that all the way down the handlebars. 2 in a row, extrude face. So you don't have to type in the value as 0.02 exactly every time. You could eyeball it if you want. I tend to like to type it in just to make sure, because sometimes I don't trust how far I pull it out with the mouse. This is a bit more accurate when I'm typing in the number manually. So I'm just going to continue and work my way down. Okay, and we're done. So that looks pretty good. So feel free to save your file as another file, bike03 in my case. And so I can go back to the previous file in case I don't like this smoothed handlebar. So I'm going to press F to center the image, and in one mode, let's press W to move it, and let's mirror. I think we can mirror the handlebar now across to get 2 of them. So I need to move my pivot point over here. So I'm going to turn my object snap on, and with W, with my move gizmo visible, I'm going to hold down the D key and middle mouse drag so my pivot point snaps over here. And let's go to Edit, Duplicate Special, Options, and I'm going to do Copy Parent -1 and Duplicate Special. Okay, so I'll select both of them and press 3 to smooth them, and Control Shift H to reveal it. So in this case, it thinks that no previously hidden objects are able to be shown. So let's go to Display Show All. So it's one of the little things in Maya that's you just figure out eventually, one of the quirks in Maya. But I think overall that looks pretty good for the handlebars. So let's move on and model the seat. Let's switch back to side view, spacebar, and go here. And let's create another, let's start with another plane, and we're going to work it in this view and then mirror it just like we did with the rest of the bike. So let's press this button. So my plane should appear right there. Let me undo that real quick just to repeat. So Control Z, and let's go to Create Polygon Primitives Plane. And so it appeared right there because my axis was in X. Sometimes if you have one of these other Y or Z chosen, the plane won't show up right away. But in this case, since we have both the X-axis chosen and interactive creation unchecked, which is here, polygon primitive interactive creation unchecked. So when I press that, by default, the plane appears at 0, 0, the origin of the scene, which is the corner. So let's move this up to here and scale it back down a little. We can start like that. And now I'm going to do this with the Move Edge tool. Let's go to Points. I'm going to select this corner one, move it down slightly. I think I need another face over here, so I'm going to go to Edge, Insert Edge Loop tool, and somewhere around here I'm going to add another division to it. Press Q to quit. Vertex mode, select that vertex. Let's move it down. And maybe around here, let's add another one. I actually selected the wrong command just now, so I press escape sometimes or Q to quit. And let's try insert edge loop again. So by now you should be getting the hang of this edge loop extrude face workflow. Barring a few other commands, that's the majority of the commands I'm going to use to show you how to model this bike. And using just those few commands, you can pretty much model anything. So I add more faces when I need a bit more detail. Let's select this and press 3 to take a look at what's going on. So this edge is looking a little too flat, so I'm going to need to insert an edge going the other way now across this. So Q to quit, and let's press 1 to go back into unsmooth mode. And let's pull this out a little bit like this, and like that. Press 3 again. How that's looking. Let me pull this back a little. Part of why this is looking so square right now is because it's actually still a flat surface. Some of this will go away once we extrude the object, but I want to get the side view looking as close as possible right now before I extrude it. Okay, that's not bad. Let's look at it in one of the other views. The perspective view, actually. Okay, so let's, with the object selected, let's snap it so it appears in line with the midpoint, the seam in the bike, so we won't have to guess where the middle of the model is later. So I'm going to turn the bike back to 1 and make sure the seat is on 1. And let's turn all my edge faces on wireframe on shaded by clicking that. And I'm going to turn my snap on with the magnet and drag this arrow out and then move it so that it's on the mouse, on the edge there, on the edge of the seam. So with that done, I can press Q to quit, switch this back to smooth mode, switch this back to smooth mode, and let's select all these faces and extrude the face going this way. Okay, so that's a start of the saddle. So I have a good idea what bike saddle this is, and because we don't have a top photo of this exact bike, I went ahead and Googled an image of that saddle, and it generally looks something like this or this, and so what we need is the top view. And I'm going to bring this top view in as another image plane. So so spacebar out of here, spacebar into this, and let's go to view, image plane, import image, and where is that? Okay, there. And so way too large. Let's select it, press so Y is in this selecting. I want to rescale it. So let's actually open up the outliner again, and we can see our image plane 3. So we can click it, click the name there, and it also popped back into perspective view. So now with the outliner still open, I'm going to go to render panels, orthographic, top view, and so now I can select it. So now I'm going to scale this down, and let's rotate it in the z-axis by 90 degrees, and move it a bit closer to by pressing F. And let's turn this saddle back to 1, so it's unsmoothed, and we can use the length of this saddle, the length of this saddle polygon to scale down the picture of the saddle. So it would probably be something like that. Let's go to shading, X-ray, so we can see through the thing. Let's move the picture so it's centered on the bike right there. And let's also, with the image plane 3 still selected in attribute editor, image plane shape tab, let's turn down the alpha gain so that the image itself is a little transparent too. And why don't we also hide the bike frame again, because we don't need to see it for now. So we know the side view is looking okay, and let me just move this image plane over again so that it's a bit more centered. Okay, so let's begin by pulling in some of these vertices. That. I actually didn't want to move the vertexes in anything but the X direction, because if I do this, then that changes the side view shape. So I'm really only pulling it with this red arrow along the X-axis. So let's close outliner by clicking this button, and that sort of puts me back into perspective view. And I'm gonna take a look at my saddle on 3 now. Okay. So spacebar, top view. So the side view matches pretty well. Let's go into shading, X-ray. Let's pull some more of these points out more subtly. While we're at it, let's put this image plane on its own layer. So click this button. Let's call this top image plane. And I'll click V to turn it off. But also we'll leave it on for the moment because I still do need to see it. Okay, so let's pull this in a little bit. Fix this curve. And on this side, on the top edge and the bottom edge, I'm going to remember not to pull the vertice in any direction other than up and down, because if I move it like this, then that will break the symmetry line. Because you can see on one, this middle line is still perfectly straight. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to grab this point, maybe this point, move it down a little bit, and see how that looks. So let's move this one over, down. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So let me turn the original image plane off. Let's go back into normal non-X-ray view. Turn this back down to 1. And let's go ahead and delete all these interfaces on the side that we're going to mirror the saddle. I accidentally double-clicked where I shouldn't have, so I'm going to undo that real quick. And press delete. And now we're also going to move the pivot point. Actually, it's already in the center. I forgot. So that should be good. So I should be able to edit, duplicate special across the -1 axis. And so there we go. So again, if I press 3 right now by selecting both of them, it should be okay. So actually, let me undo that for a second. So edit, duplicate special, and let's change this to instance and leave this at 1. So one of the things I didn't show you was that as long as you don't combine them right now, everything you do to this side of the object when you have it instance selected on duplicate special will be repeated on the other side. So if I, let's say, move this out, it would replicate the move on the other side, for example. So right now, let's take a look at the underside of the saddle a bit, because you can see, let's say, in this reference photo, this photo, it's not, well, I know for a fact that the saddle is not completely solid like that. In fact, the underside is probably pushed in a little. So why don't we try that right now? I'm going to select these bottom faces and shift right click extrude, and you see what happens it actually makes 2 extrusions because the object isn't joined in the middle. The vertices aren't welded. So if you look at it on one, it may look like it's working, but as soon as you start scaling or extruding, you can tell that this object really isn't in one object. So what this means is I have to undo this, and let's make the object into one object. So shift and click, and then shift click to select both of them, and then shift right click to combine. And now when we do it, it still won't work until we go around and merge all the vertices. So let's try the. I usually try it like this by selecting all the vertexes, and then shift right clicking and going to merge vertices, and pressing Q to quit. And so I try this first usually, and if that doesn't work, then I go in and individually merge each of the vertices that line the seam, which is a bit more time consuming. So in this case it didn't work, so we're gonna have to go and do that. So in vertex mode, let's turn it to wireframe by pressing 4 and shift merge and select merge vertices and merge vertices. And so you can see as I do that, I can press G for each subsequent one, which makes it a bit easier. G. You can see the wireframe, the smooth wireframe adjusting as I join each pair of vertices. So I'm just pressing G after each command. It's actually quite fast. And I think that's it. So that means that now when I run that command, let's press 5 to go into shaded mode. Now when I select all the bottom pieces, so sometimes I accidentally select that, so I can press Control Z to go back to the previous selection. So now on 1, I'm going to shift right click, extrude face, and go into scale mode by pressing one of the cubes, dragging the cube to scale down a little bit. And then I'm going to press G to run the extrude command again, and this time I'm going to pull in to begin to hollow it out. And you can see that this is starting to exceed the exterior walls. So while I'm extruding, I'm also going to go back to the scale mode and scale it down a little so that the walls begin to taper a bit and don't exceed the boundaries of the outside. So now you should have something like this. I'm going to press Q to quit, press 3, and it looks okay, but I'm going to undo this because apparently I accidentally selected an additional face. So let's Control Z out of this. So I guess I had it selected from the beginning, which you should always check that. So in face mode, I'm going to shift click to unselect that. So now with the proper faces selected, I'm going to shift right click, extrude face, scale it down like this. Let's continue scaling it down, look at it on 1, and then press G to do it again. And drag the blue arrow in, and let's scale it down a lot more. That. Okay, and then we can continue. Let me push it up a little bit more. Okay, that looks better. So let's take a look at how this lines up in top view again, just to be sure. So let's go to Panels, Orthographic, Top. And it's more or less still within the boundaries of the top view. And if we go to Orthographic Side, it's still more or less, hopefully, when I turn it on, within the boundaries of the side view. So that's, pretty good. So let's go back into Panels, Perspective, and let's just evaluate how this is looking. I think that's pretty close. So let's display show all to bring the frame back in. And so as you can see, the bike saddle is still floating. So why don't we do a really quick version. Let's not get too caught up in exactly like this thing, but let's model some rails and we'll attach it to the seat post. The saddle is still looking a bit weird, I think, so let's look at it in one mode and let's bring down this top edge. Press 4, and you can see I've accidentally selected some ones back here, so I'm going to shift click, press 5 to move back out. So what I also could have done was clicked one and double clicked the next one, clicked one and double clicked the next one, and then went in and unclicked these two top ones there. Oh, but I see that I've selected some stray ones. I'm going to shift click and remove those. And press W. Well, let's press 4 to make sure I didn't select any ones I don't want. 5 to move back. W, and then let's just move this whole edge down like this as far as it'll go. And then also scale it in a little bit. Just a little bit. And so on 3 mode you can tell it's a little bit better than what it was before. Oh, so you see what I did there again was I had a stray edge selected. So let's undo to before we made that move. And let's really get it right this time. Shift click, shift click. So it helps if you look at it on 1 sometimes. The hit detection on the smooth mode sometimes is a bit inaccurate. So I like to really be sure, sometimes you have to switch back to 1 mode. So let's press 5. And now let's drag and move this down. Drag and move this down. Okay, much better. So let's go to orthographic side. Let's get these rails in now. So I'm going to do the same thing as before to create a image plane. Not an image plane, just a regular polygon plane. I mean, let's move it back up over here. Let's actually go to shading. Let's turn X-ray on again. And art scale. And even though this is pretty pixelated, I'm going to rotate this a little. And I'm going to move this edge like this. And I'm going to rotate the edge. And then shift, right click, extrude edge, and go absolute extrusion. E to rotate. I'm going to rotate the edge a little bit like this. W to move it down, and then shift right click to extrude the edge like that. And I'll move it up slightly like that. Okay. So pressing 3, we have something like that, and let's insert some additional edge loops. Maybe here, here, and here, and here. It's Q to quit, and let's also press W to turn on snap, and let's snap it to the middle right there. So I know there's 2 of them, So let's shift select this and just alt hide the saddle and the rail, and let's turn, making sure snap is on. Let's just snap it somewhere like that. But then let's move it so that it's still, by turning snap off, let's move it underneath the saddle so that it's still inside the saddle somewhat. Maybe we can take this edge even, and move it up a little bit so that it's fully within the saddle. And let's also rotate the actual rail slightly so that it sits more parallel with this edge. And we're going to go into tool settings and change our axis orientation to world. So now when I rotate it, it's going to rotate like that. Okay, so press Q to quit. And now let's select all these faces and shift right click and extrude the face. And this time let's extrude out like this. And let's turn X-ray off so we can look at what we're doing. Okay, Q to quit. And now let's alt hide just the rail and look at it on one mode, and let's add some edges towards the end points. Q to quit so that the rail looks a bit not as sharp. So let's Control Shift H to unhide the saddle. And now let's select the saddle, select the rail, and if you press W, you'll see that the pivot point is still wherever you left it. And let's actually move the pivot point so that it is in the midpoint of the saddle, because that's where we want to mirror this other piece. So with the saddle selected, with the rail selected, turn on your snap, press D, and middle mouse click to there. So you can, it is possible to snap your pivot to other objects other than the object itself. So now with my pivot there, I switch to world, and with the rail still selected, let's duplicate special. So that didn't work. So let's Control Z that. So this time let's make sure, let's go to Edit, Delete by Type, let's delete History. And let's also go to Modify Freeze Transformations. So then this time with W on, let's go to Edit, Duplicate Special Options, and let's make sure Scale is at -1, 1, 1. And let's do Copy Parent. So there we go. And press 3, Control Shift H. And so that didn't work, so let's go to Display, Show, All. So for the sake of time, let's just do a simplified version of this connection from the seat to the seat post. Let's go to Edge Mode, go to Insert Edge Loop, and let's switch back to multiple edge loops and leave that on 1. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here, split this in half, and I'm going to press Q to quit and select this face, and just simply bridge the face. And then I may also, let's see if this looks okay. I'm going to select this face and extrude both faces at the same time, just to give it a little bite there. And I'll press 3, Q to quit. And let's add a couple edge loops to give it a bit a harder edge. So shift right click, insert edge loop tool. And so I'm still on this mode, so that's okay. Actually, I'm going to undo those last two. Control Z, Control Z. And uncheck and click this to relative distance from edge and do something close to here and something close to here. Press Q to quit. Okay, so we've put sort of a little box there. From far away, you're not going to notice it. So sometimes that's a totally valid technique when you're modeling in 3D. You don't absolutely have to model every nut and bolt, depending on what the angle of view is or how close up you're going to render the thing. There's different levels of detail. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll get ready to model the wheels.